Imagine discovering that the body you live in right now, even after 60, is still actively waiting for permission to rebuild itself. Not symbolically, not motivationally, but biologically. Your muscles are not retired. Your nervous system is not finished learning. Your cells are not closing shop. They are responsive, adaptive, and remarkably willing to change the moment you give them the right signals. Aging is not a shutdown sequence. It is a negotiation between stimulus and response. And when we understand that, the conversation with our body becomes less about limitation and more about participation. The most important shift to understand after 60 is that your body has not lost its ability to adapt. It has simply become more selective about the signals it responds to. Biological adaptation is not reserved for youth. It is a lifelong property of living tissue. Every muscle fiber, nerve pathway, and metabolic process operates on a principle often described in physiology as use-dependent remodeling. When a structure is challenged appropriately, the body interprets that challenge as a request to upgrade capacity. When it is not, the body conserves energy by reducing that capacity. This is not failure. It is efficiency. The encouraging reality is that this system never switches off. Muscle tissue offers one of the clearest examples. Even in later decades of life, resistance or load-bearing movement activates cellular sensors that stimulate protein synthesis, the process responsible for maintaining and rebuilding muscle fibers. These microscopic adaptations accumulate over time, restoring strength and improving joint stability. Importantly, the nervous system evolves alongside these changes. Repeated movement refines neural signaling, improving coordination and reaction. Speed. The sensation many people interpret as getting stronger is actually the integration of muscular repair and neural efficiency working together. Adaptation extends far beyond muscles. Bones remain metabolically active tissue, continuously remodeling in response to mechanical stress. When the skeleton experiences safe, consistent loading, specialized cells increase mineral deposition, reinforcing structural integrity. Circulatory adaptations also occur. Regular movement encourages vascular flexibility, supporting oxygen delivery and nutrient exchange at the cellular level. These processes collectively enhance endurance and tissue resilience, creating a foundation for sustained physical function. Metabolism, often blamed for slowing with age, is similarly responsive. Cells contain energy-producing structures that adjust output based on activity demands. When movement becomes habitual, these systems recalibrate to support higher efficiency, improving stamina and recovery. The body is not passively aging, it is dynamically responding to behavioral cues. Each deliberate action, a controlled lift, a steady walk, a balanced stretch, communicates biological intent. What changes after 60 is not the presence of adaptability, but the necessity for intentional repetition. The body prioritizes patterns it encounters consistently, reinforcing pathways that signal survival and usefulness. In this way, strength becomes less about force and more about communication. The tissues interpret regular stimulus as proof that capability is still required, and they respond by preserving and upgrading the systems involved. This ongoing dialogue between action and adaptation defines how vitality is maintained across decades, revealing that physiological plasticity remains an active, accessible resource waiting for engagement. Movement after 60 functions less like exercise in the conventional sense and more like a biological conversation that reopens lines of communication between muscles, nerves, and circulation. With age, inactivity can dull these signaling pathways, not because they disappear, but because the body is designed to economize energy when stimulation is absent. When you begin to move deliberately again, even gently, mechanoreceptors embedded in muscle and connective tissue detect tension and motion. These receptors transmit signals through the nervous system, essentially announcing that coordinated effort is required. The brain responds by refining motor patterns, improving timing, and restoring efficiency in how muscles contract and relax. This neural engagement is inseparable from circulation. Contracting muscles act like auxiliary pumps, helping move blood and lymphatic fluid throughout the body. As circulation improves, tissues receive more oxygen and nutrients, supporting cellular repair and metabolic balance. The sensation of warmth or lightness after movement reflects this internal redistribution of resources. Over time, vascular tissues adapt by becoming more responsive, allowing smoother regulation of blood flow during activity and rest. At the cellular level, repeated movement activates repair pathways that maintain structural proteins and mitochondrial function, the machinery responsible for energy production. These adaptations enhance endurance and reduce the metabolic cost of everyday tasks. The body begins to interpret movement as a normal, expected demand, reorganizing its internal priorities around readiness and resilience. Coordination improves because neural circuits are being rehearsed, circulation becomes more efficient because tissues are regularly perfused, and muscles regain their capacity to generate controlled force. What emerges is not merely increased activity tolerance, but a reintegration of systems that were always meant to operate in synchrony, reinforcing the body's inherent design for regeneration and functional continuity. Emotional well-being is not separate from physical activity. It is deeply embedded in the body's chemistry and neural signaling. When you engage in purposeful movement, sensory receptors in muscles and joints send a steady stream of information to the brain, particularly to regions involved in mood regulation and stress interpretation. This sensory input acts as a stabilizing signal, telling the nervous system that the organism is active, capable, and safe to invest energy in restoration, rather than defense. In response, the brain adjusts its neurochemical environment, increasing the availability of neurotransmitters associated with motivation, calm focus, and emotional balance. One important effect of regular movement is the modulation of stress hormones. Gentle but consistent activity helps recalibrate the hypothalamic-pituitary-adrenal axis, the system that governs how the body reacts to perceived threat. Instead of remaining in a prolonged alert state, the nervous system learns to cycle more efficiently between activation and recovery. This flexibility reduces background inflammation and supports clearer thinking, which many people experience as improved mood stability and resilience. The emotional lift that follows movement is not accidental encouragement. It is a biological reinforcement designed to sustain behaviors that protect long-term function. Movement also influences the brain's plasticity. Increased blood flow delivers oxygen and growth factors that support neural maintenance and connectivity, particularly in regions tied to memory and emotional processing. Over time, this nourishment promotes more adaptive stress responses and a stronger sense of agency. The body begins to associate motion with restoration rather than effort alone. Emotional vitality emerges from this loop of action and feedback. Physical engagement shapes chemistry. Chemistry shapes perception, and perception guides behavior. In this continuous exchange, the boundaries between body and mind become less distinct, revealing a unified system where deliberate movement becomes a reliable pathway to psychological steadiness and renewed engagement with daily life. A profound shift occurs when aging is viewed not as a slow decline, but as an ongoing process of refinement and recalibration. The tissues of the body are not inherently weaker simply because years have passed. They have accumulated experience, adaptation, and subtle changes in structure that reflect a lifetime of use. Muscles, tendons, and ligaments have memory. They respond to the patterns they encounter repeatedly, and even gentle stimulation can trigger improvements in strength, coordination, and resilience. Balance, often feared as something lost with age, can be retrained through careful engagement of sensory and motor systems. The vestibular system in the inner ear, the proprioceptive feedback from joints and muscles, and the integration of visual cues all work together to maintain equilibrium. When these systems are deliberately stimulated, the body relearns how to coordinate itself, improving stability and reducing the risk of falls. Bones, too, remain capable of responding to mechanical signals. Weight-bearing activity, even moderate, encourages osteoblast activity, the cells responsible for maintaining and strengthening bone tissue. Cartilage, often misunderstood as degenerative with age, continues to benefit from controlled movement, which promotes nutrient diffusion into joint surfaces and preserves flexibility. The nervous system is equally adaptable. Repeated practice of controlled movements strengthens synaptic pathways, enhancing reaction times, coordination, and body awareness. Each small effort sends a clear message. These systems are still needed, and the body responds by maintaining and refining their function. This perspective transforms the experience of aging. Movements become experiments in capability rather than tests of limitation. The body is not a deteriorating machine, but a responsive organism capable of recalibration and improvement. When approached with curiosity, patience, and incremental challenge, each movement is an opportunity to deepen physical literacy, sharpen neural efficiency, and strengthen the mind-body connection, revealing that adaptation is not confined to youth, but remains a dynamic force throughout life. Reclaiming strength after 60 is less about competing with past achievements and more about honoring the body's current capacity and potential. The human organism is remarkably responsive when it perceives that effort and care are valued, interpreting consistent signals of use as justification to preserve and enhance its systems. Each deliberate action, from a controlled stretch to a purposeful walk, communicates to the muscles, nerves, and connective tissues that they are still needed. This ongoing dialogue fosters repair, coordination, and resilience, allowing strength to emerge not as a measure of youthful performance, but as evidence of a cooperative relationship between mind and body. Recovery becomes an essential partner in this process. The body does not merely respond to effort, it requires pauses to integrate adaptation. During rest, protein synthesis in muscles is optimized, neural pathways consolidate improved motor patterns, and energy systems recalibrate to support future demands. This interplay between action and recovery illustrates that strength is not a single endpoint, but a rhythm, a conversation repeated daily between intention and response. Nutrition, sleep, and mindful attention to movement further reinforce this dynamic. When the body receives consistent supportive signals, whether through nourishing food, adequate rest, or carefully chosen exercises, it interprets them as confirmation of relevance, investing in tissue maintenance, neural efficiency, and cardiovascular stability. This principle applies equally to smaller, intentional actions, such as balance exercises or gentle resistance work. The cumulative effect of these signals is a measurable improvement in functional strength, stability, and confidence. In this light, reclaiming strength becomes an act of partnership rather than struggle. The body is no longer an adversary to overcome, but a collaborator, responding to thoughtful engagement with adaptive growth. Strength, in this context, is a reflection of attentiveness, patience, and consistent communication, emerging naturally from a system that is still capable, still responsive, and still eager to cooperate when given the opportunity.